Right after my father's funeral, my husband, who had secretly looked at the inheritance papers, said to me, "Don't be greedy now." I was shocked. He continued, "Now I can't quit my job, thanks to that old man." I couldn't believe it. "Are you talking about my father?" I asked. He quickly corrected himself. "Oops, I didn't mean that. Anyway, once you get the inheritance, put it in our joint account as soon as you can." At that moment, my husband and my mother-in-law were excitedly talking about which car to buy. I had enough. They always put the housework on me and asked for money. Now they were insulting my father too. I decided I didn't need a husband or a mother-in-law like this. Trying to stay calm, I smiled and said, "You and your mother can use the money however you want." My name is Catherine. I'm 38 years old, a working housewife. My parents, both doctors, ran a successful clinic in our town. As their only daughter, I grew up surrounded by love and care. After I graduated from pharmacy school, I got a job at a big pharmaceutical company. Even though my parents were disappointed that I didn't become a doctor, they supported my decision to work in pharmacy and encouraged me to do my best. After I started my job, I often visited my childhood home and shared meals with my family. We were very close. About 10 years ago, my mother tragically died in a car accident. She was only in her 50s, and her sudden loss left me in shock and deep sadness. My father was also devastated, so much so that he had to temporarily close the clinic. During this time, my boyfriend James was a great support to me. We had met through mutual friends, and throughout our relationship, he kept encouraging me, helping me heal from the grief of losing my mother. 2 years after my mother's death, James proposed, and I said yes right away. James worked for a small to medium-sized company in the food industry, living a typical office worker's life. My job at the pharmaceutical company paid much better than his, but money didn't matter to me. I believed that, together, we could support each other and have a loving marriage. My father was very happy about our engagement. He said, "I've heard that James supported Catherine when she was sad about her mother's passing. I'm really grateful for that. Please continue to take good care of her." My father looked at James with a grateful expression. Standing tall, James replied, "I will always make sure she's happy." I looked at both of them with a warm, happy feeling. The next week, we went to James's parents' house to announce our engagement. His parents had divorced when he was young, so it was just his mother who lived there. When I met my mother-in-law for the first time, I noticed she wore more makeup than I expected. She looked me up and down as if judging the product and said, "So, you're the one James is marrying. Don't you think she's a bit plain for you, James? Isn't she older than you? Wouldn't someone younger and prettier be better?" Before I could say anything, James jumped in and said, "Ma'am, Catherine works at Pharma, and her dad is a doctor." I thought James would talk about my personality, but it seemed like he was just mentioning our jobs and family background. When my mother-in-law heard that, her eyes lit up. "Well, why didn't you mention that earlier? In that case, I approve of your marriage, Catherine." I thanked her. James seemed really happy when his mom approved of our marriage, but I still felt uneasy. We got married soon after. Before we registered our marriage, my father, who also invests in real estate alongside his medical work, gave us a luxury apartment downtown as a wedding gift. The apartment was in my name. I said to James, "Even though my father gave us this apartment, it's our home. Let's live together in harmony." James smiled happily, and that's how our married life began. After we got married, I realized that James, who had always lived with his parents, had almost no skills when it came to housework. He didn't know how to cook, couldn't use the washing machine, and didn't even try to learn. The worst part was that he wouldn't throw his trash in the bin. I cared about keeping the house neat, so this really bothered me. In the first year of our marriage, I was still in the honeymoon phase and took care of everything. But as work got more tiring, my patience started to wear thin. By the second year, I finally told James how frustrated I was. He replied, "I'm tired from work too. Catherine, you're better at housework. If you're good at it, why not just do it?" Despite my efforts to make him understand, he didn't. Our marriage continued with him not helping with any chores. But it didn't stop there. After we got married, I realized that his mother was also quite a handful. James didn't seem to care much about things like family events. Since James didn't really get involved in family events, I would represent him on occasions like Mother's Day. For his mom, I picked a high-quality scarf from a department store and sent it with some carnations. After a while, I got a call from my mother-in-law. I thought it would be a thank you call, but she sounded upset. "Catherine, I got the Mother's Day gift, but what is this? What brand is this scarf? It's so thoughtless to send something like this," she said. I was sure the scarf was from a good brand and worth over $200, but she didn't care. "I don't need such a plain scarf. How about one from this luxury brand?" she said, naming a high-end brand that would cost over $1,000. I tried to explain. "Sorry, but that's a bit beyond our budget," but she cut me off and said, "Next time, just send cash for Mother's Day. $500 should be enough, and for my birthday, I expect more than $1,000. Understood." Then she hung up. When I told James about this, he said, "Just do as she says. It's for Mother's Day. Think of it as honoring your parents." Since then, we've been sending her the money she asks for. By our 5th year of marriage, she started visiting more often and asking for money each time. James would hand it to her with a smile. Both of us work, but James doesn't make enough to cover this, so I've had to use our savings. Even though I felt resentful, I tried to endure it. James had been there for me when my mother passed away, and we had promised to be together forever. After all, she was his mother. I kept reminding myself of that. And now, in our 8th year of marriage, I still do all the housework and often give money to my mother-in-law. One day, while I was juggling all of this, I received an unexpected call from my father. The news he shared was shocking. He had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and there was nothing more that could be done. I couldn't help but cry as my father gently stroked my head and said, "It's fate, and we must accept it. Don't worry, I'll be all right." In addition to my job and household responsibilities, I started visiting my father in the hospital. My workplace was understanding, but the problem was at home. Even though I told James about my father's condition, he didn't offer any help. He just said, "It must be tough, but hang in there. I'm also busy with work." He only visited my father in the hospital once. At that time, I was so focused on my father's illness that I had no time to think about James. If I had any spare moments, they were spent thinking about my father. I wanted to focus on thinking about my father. One day, my father suddenly asked me, "Catherine, is your marriage going well?" Thoughts of James's behavior and my mother-in-law came to my mind, making me hesitate before answering. My father then said, "You're free to choose your own happiness after I'm gone. You won't be held back in any way." I couldn't hold back my tears and started crying in front of him. He tightly gripped my hand, and 3 months later, he passed away. I was overwhelmed with grief and had to take care of all the funeral arrangements. As for James, even though he saw how upset I was, he didn't offer to help, but I was too busy with everything to focus on him. Many people came to my father's funeral, and I felt it was a good farewell for him. Both James and my mother-in-law attended. The day after the funeral, I received a phone call from a lawyer about my father's inheritance. I met with the lawyer, and the news was unbelievable. After taxes, my father's assets totaled over $3 million. Besides his income as a doctor, he had made investments that had grown to this huge amount. He had left everything to me, his only daughter. I was shocked and trembling at the amount, but I managed to finish all the paperwork. Later, while I was resting on the couch, I woke up to hear James and my mother-in-law talking loudly. I asked, "Why are you here?" James turned to me with bright eyes and said, "Catherine, well done. Why didn't you tell us earlier?" My eyes widened in shock when I saw that James was holding the inheritance documents I had received from the lawyer. "Hey, why are you looking at those documents without asking me first?" I said. James looked at me and said, "It's $3 million. Isn't that amazing? This will secure our lives forever." I was shocked and confused. He continued, "My mom and I will split this $3 million. Don't be greedy. Finally, I can't quit my job. I owe it to that old man." Wait, when you say old man, are you talking about my father? I asked. Oops, I misspoke, James quickly replied. Anyway, make sure you transfer the inheritance to our joint account soon. Both James and my mother-in-law were excitedly discussing which car to buy. That was the last straw for me. He'd been pushing all the housework onto me, taking my money, and now insulting my late father. I didn't need a husband or mother-in-law like this. I held back my anger, forced a smile, and said, "Sure, you and your mom can spend the money however you want." James looked pleased and said, "You're so understanding. Well then, work hard like a workhorse. I don't want our savings to run out too fast." The next day, James and my mother-in-law started spending money recklessly. James quickly quit his job, and my mother-in-law moved into our home. They would leave early in the morning, returning later with several shopping bags from high-end stores. We went to a 3-star restaurant, and they complained, saying it was okay for newly rich people like us, but it felt a bit lacking. They treated me like a maid. James seemed to think that a $3 million inheritance was coming soon. He started withdrawing money from our joint account without asking me. Our savings, which were about $100, were disappearing fast. I warned him, but he didn't care. We're about to get $3 million, so this amount isn't a big deal, he said. A month later, James and my mother-in-law went on a trip to Hawaii. Of course, they didn't invite me to Hawaii. After seeing them off, I immediately started the divorce process. A week later, while I was relaxing at home, I heard a loud knock at the door. When I looked through the peephole, I saw James and my mother-in-law back from their trip, wearing Hawaiian shirts. I opened the door and coldly asked, "What do you want?" James raised his voice and said, "What's going on? The front door key isn't working." "Oh, I changed the locks," I replied. "So, of course, it doesn't work." They looked confused, and I said through the intercom, "Let's talk at a nearby cafe. I'll be there soon." They protested loudly, but eventually left when they realized it was pointless. Once they were gone, I headed to the cafe. When I arrived, I found James and my mother-in-law waiting, both looking very angry. James shouted, "What's the meaning of this? Give us the new key." I calmly replied, "You both need to leave the house." I handed James a piece of paper. It was a filled-out divorce form. "What divorce? Why are you talking about this all of a sudden?" James asked, shocked. I looked at them and asked, "Either way, are you two okay with money?" "What money?" James sneered and said, "We should be fine. Since we're expecting your father's inheritance, there should still be $50 left in our joint account. Look, I'll show you." He opened his bank app, but his face dropped when he saw the balance. "Why isn't the money there?" he asked, staring at the screen, completely confused. I then told them I transferred $50 to my account as part of the property division, so it's not there anymore. Since we're getting divorced, dividing our assets is only fair. "Right," I said casually. James widened his eyes for a moment, then smirked. "Oh, okay, I'll divorce you, but you need to transfer your inheritance to me quickly." I raised an eyebrow. "Assets gained after marriage need to be divided, right?" "Actually, the inheritance I got from my father isn't part of the property division," I explained. A quiet silence fell over us. They really thought they could claim the inheritance I got from my father. I sighed in disbelief. My mother-in-law, angry, confronted me. "Go check it for yourself." James immediately started searching on his phone and found that property inherited from parents isn't subject to division in a divorce. "Are you serious?" James and my mother-in-law were shocked. Desperate, James pleaded, "Catherine, let's not divorce. I have no savings left. I won't survive if you leave me." I looked at him firmly and said, "Enough with your nonsense. Take responsibility for what you've done. You treated me like a gold digger and a maid. I will never forget what you did. I'm divorcing you, even if it means going to court." My outburst surprised both James and his mother, who made a pathetic noise. I quickly left the cafe. Later, James and I got divorced. The $50 I moved was counted as part of the property division, so I was finally able to kick James and his mother out of our home. After the divorce, James had spent all the property division money and was left penniless. He got into debt with credit card bills from overseas trips and other expenses. Eventually, he and his mother had to borrow money to pay off their debts and ended up living in a rundown apartment, working hard to repay what they owed. As for me, I sold the apartment I shared with James and moved into the one my father used to live in. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I don't have any financial problems. I'm very grateful to him and plan to cherish every day.